Welcome and good morning. My name is Holly Marcolina and I'm the principal of Marathon Junior Senior High School, and it is my honor to welcome you to this year's Veterans Recognition Assembly. Last year, our Veterans Celebration looked different. We honored our veterans outside in a drive-through parade. Because we were on a hybrid schedule, only half of our student body was able to participate. This year, we are grateful to honor our veterans in person with some of our senior high students here in the auditorium. The majority of our student audience is participating via live stream in classrooms for this portion of the event. For students, staff, and community who are here in the auditorium, just a reminder that masks must be worn except if you're speaking here at the podium, and you should be socially distanced just a few chairs away from each other. These are veterans from our own area, our own community, and even our own families. Before we hear from them, Mrs. Brown will now take a moment to share what Veterans Day really means.
So what is Veterans Day? We history teachers tell you it's Armistice Day for World War I, when on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, the fighting of World War I came to an end in 1919. And this date was later chosen to be the day we honor all veterans who have served our country. I am a proud wife to a veteran, and I've come to find that Veterans Day is not what you think. So what is Veterans Day? Veterans Day is often just another day of work. Many veterans have to go to work if they aren't retired. In fact, at least one of them on the stage drove a bus for you today before they showed up to this assembly. They don't get the day off like schools do. They work, and you sleep in. That's what happened in our house a lot of years. In fact, many restaurants do some really nice things for veterans. Go get your bloomin' onion, right? But often, they aren't even available to enjoy them. Veterans Day is a day that makes some veterans feel very uncomfortable. They didn't ask for recognition. In fact, these veterans today did not ask for this assembly. But we and they understand it is an important part of your education. They do want you to be thankful for veterans, but they want you to be thankful for the veterans who served alongside them, not just for them or themselves. Veterans Day is one day, set aside so that we can recognize the many days that veterans have served for us. So thank you, veterans, for being our reluctant guests here today, and we are honored that you are allowing us to thank you personally through this ceremony. In addition, I'd like to give each one of them some letters from the elementary school. Students up at Appleby, if you're watching, good job giving them. I'll show you. We're going to hand them out to our veterans. All right, now Mr. Kurtz is going to come up and introduce himself, the veterans.
Welcome to Marathon High School's annual Veterans Day ceremony. A special thanks to those who have made the live stream of this event possible. They're up in the balcony, Mr. Dennison and Mr. Dennison's class. Thank you very much for doing that. Special hello to my father and uncle who are veterans and both watching today. And hi, Mom. Mom's not a veteran. And also retired Navy commander and former marathon substitute teacher Dave Doxey, who is watching from his new home in Mississippi, and also my cousin, Senior Chief John McCown. And most importantly, welcome honored veterans here in attendance. Thank you for being here. America has been through a lot the last couple years, if you could ever have imagined it happening, all the things that have gone on. And sometimes it's almost impossible to wade through the chaos and the cynical attitudes that you'll hear everywhere. America has experienced a lot, and we must put aside the political fighting and division and remind ourselves what is important and what are the facts. We remain the freest people in the world. We are equal under the law by constitutional amendments. Every life has dignity here, liberty, and the ability to pursue happiness. No one knows that more than veterans who have seen more of the world than most of us. COVID will never take that away from us, and neither can any foreign power. Abe Lincoln said once that if America is to be destroyed, it will be by suicide. It may seem an overused statement, but freedom is not free, and it is not secured without sacrifice. Our veterans stand as examples of that sacrifice and deserve our admiration. They are the true constant through every challenge in our history. We must look to them for example. We must honor them, the men and women who have symbolically stood on the wall of freedom and kept watch. This week, the annual Veterans Day shares a few other important days. It's the 100th anniversary of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier at Arlington Cemetery that honors the dead from America's wartime sacrifice that cannot be recognized or identified. And also, I would be remiss if I did not mention, with Marines in attendance, like Dan Morehouse, that today is the 256th anniversary of the birthday of the U.S. Marine Corps. But today is more important for all of our veterans. As Colin Powell said, the late Colin Powell, Veterans Day is a time when the nation stops and recognizes we are free. We are a democracy. We are a successful country in the world because we've had to fight for it over the years. So let us do this. Veterans, thank you for being here today, and you are an example of our towns and our families called into war in America's history and others serving in peace. It has taken you, no matter what your job, your military calling, to keep America safe. America does not exist without your sacrifice and countrymen, regardless of race, creed, social class, a true colorblind meritocracy. Some drafted, some volunteered, Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, Coast Guard, all have stood on this stage for Marathon and other towns like it. Someday we might even have someone from the Space Force as a veteran here, although I would expect not to be here by then. So, together with me, let's give our veterans a round of applause, and then I will I'm going to pass the microphone around to each of them and ask them to introduce themselves, tell us the branch that they served, and anything else that they might be inspired to tell us about their service.
Roger McFadden, United States Army, 2006 to 2013.
Dakota Finch, Air Force, 2010 to 2016.
Carl Morrissey, United States Air Force, 1995 to 2015.
I'm Gary Conroy. I was drafted into the service in 64. I was in 64, 65, was out in 66. I was in engineering, heavy equipment, and went to Vietnam. It took us 32 days in a whole of a ship to get over to Vietnam. And I just wanted to tell you people that when I was on this ship, we could only get into our bunks by on our backs or on our side, on our stomach. You couldn't roll over. That's how close the guy up above you was sleeping. And to do that every day for 32 days, it was a long trip. And then not being able to, you're thinking about what you're going to get into when you got there, and that was really made it really long. So I want to thank you.
Jim Contray, Army, 1957 to 1975.
Chris Anderson, Army, 2001 to 2013.
My name is Stuart Clark. I served aboard a newly commissioned guided missile destroyer, the USS Tatnall. We were in the Caribbean at the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Most people don't realize how close it came to millions of Russians and millions of Americans. Your grandparents could have been annihilated. There was a conference between John Kennedy, our president, and Nikita Khrushchev. While we were down in the Caribbean, merchant ships were sailing from Russia to Cuba, loaded with nuclear missiles, 90 miles off the coast of Florida. Nikita Khrushchev blinked. He turned the ships around and went back. One man died. Nobody in this room probably knows his name. Do you? Rudolph Alex Anderson. Rudolph Anderson was flying a spy plane 75,000 feet over Cuba, taking pictures, and the Russians shot him down. I've asked permission to give some words of advice, some mistakes that I made myself. Number one, do not quit school. In 10th grade, I quit school. I told the math teacher, I know already more than you know. I know more than these books can teach me, so I'm out of here. And Mrs. Witch-Elms said, you'll be sorry that you ever quit school. And I've carried that burden since 1961. Do not quit school. You hear me? Number two. Don't become a slave to nicotine, alcohol, or drugs. Do not become a slave. Some of these guys up on stage can back me up. Nicotine, you can become a slave to nicotine and alcohol and drugs. Don't do it. I remember having my two kids sitting at the kitchen table. I took a white t-shirt and I cut out what I thought would look like a pair of lungs, a person's lungs. I borrowed a cigarette from the guy at work, sat the kids down at the kitchen table, and I smoked that cigarette and I blew the smoke through that white t-shirt. Try it sometime. That was just 2 or 3 puffs. What that will do to your lungs, the only set of lungs that God gives to you. Don't become a slave to nicotine. And I wrote down some figures here. If a pack of cigarettes costs $10 a pack, and you smoke a pack and a half a day, times 365 days, comes to $5,475. If you smoke for 5 years, it'll come to $27,376. That's half the price of a new pickup truck, man. $27,000 in 5 years for cigarettes. And if your wife smokes, $54,000. Don't become a slave to nicotine. Number 3, leave profanity where it belongs, in the toilet. Number 5, another mistake I made. I never told my mother I loved her. I never told my father I loved him. And now I'm haunted by it. When you push away from the supper table tonight, say thanks to your mother for fixing the food, washing the clothes, your dad going to work, a roof over your head, a bar of soap, a roll of toilet paper. Say thank you and I love you. Today I'm doing that to a stone at the cemetery. And then one more word of advice. There's a saying that I have in the garage. I don't know where it came from, but it says, what is not readily recoverable, once it has been lost, is trust. If you can't be trusted, you got a burden on your shoulders. I remember over here where the pizzeria was when I was a kid. There was a gas station there owned by Charlie Ackerman. I used to pretend When I opened up the cash register, I would pretend to put in a dollar bill. Then I would take out a handful of change. I was stealing from Charlie Ackerman. One day he saw me do that. He said, "Don't ever get your hand in my cash register again." About 4 decades after that, it continued to haunt me, and I carried it on my shoulders because I had stolen from the Methodist Church, I had stolen from Josie Clouseau, I had stolen from Ray Maloney, I had stolen from the IGA, I had stolen from Charlie Ackerman. So I sent some money to Charlie Ackerman and Joanne, his wife. Joanne called up. She said, "My husband has waited 40 years for you to pay him back for what you stole out of his cash register." I carried that on my shoulders for 40 years. Stand up. Be tall. Be somebody.
My name is Jim Robinson, U.S. Army. I served in Vietnam from 69 to 71.
Clifford Gleason, I served in the United States Marine Corps from 1962 to 1966.
My name is Dan Morehouse. I served in 2009 to 2017 in the United States Marine Corps.
Steve Zosnak, United States Army, served 66 to 69, spent 15 months in Germany as crew chief, medical evacuation helicopter, transferred to Vietnam as gunner, crew chief, and a UH-1 helicopter. Thank you.
I'm Mike Brown. You probably know me as Mrs. Brown's Mr. Brown, or Connor Brown's dad. I was in the U.S. Army from 1984 to 1991 as an airborne ranger. I fought in the war of drugs. I've been on 6 of the 7 continents doing that. My advice, don't do drugs. I'll come get you. After that, I was in the U.S. Army Reserves as a drill instructor for the combat engineers at the Ithaca Armory.
So I'm going to ask our veterans to move to a more comfortable seating. Can we give them one more round of applause as they do that? Now I have the pleasure of introducing this year's guest speaker. And as a reminder to all of you, if you do have veterans in your family, men and women that served in the armed forces, make sure that you do thank them for their service today. And as our speaker last year said, honor their service by serving yourself, doing things for others, honoring their sacrifice by making where you live a better place. And that's what our next speaker does. Ricky Mills, I was introduced to him, to Mr. Mills, through my cousin, Senior Chief John McCallum. The two of them share interest in hunting and fishing, and a company called Wild Jaeger that you can look up online. It's all over the place. And the few times I hunted and fished with Ricky Mills, I've always been impressed by his passion for things like the outdoors, his attention to detail, his loyalty to his friends, his interest in world cultures and people from all over the world, and most importantly, his love for America and for his fellow veterans. Ricky grew up in a town, the Jordan Elbridge area, town not unlike our own. He wrestled like many of you. He likes to hunt and fish. He enlisted in 1989 in the U.S. Army, and I know that it is said the best way to avoid danger and challenges in life is to never volunteer for anything and from looking at his resume, he didn't get that message. Mr. Mills did not follow that path. His resume as a soldier is long and impressive, one that he does not talk to you about. He does not brag about the things he has done, but I will mention a few of them. He was a forward observer in the infantry, a field artillery officer, an Army Ranger for 6 years, and then he made the cut to enter the very elite of the U.S. Army, its Special Forces, where he qualified as a combat diver, did other training, including jungle training, and anything you can imagine someone in that line of work would do. Mr. Mills achieved the status, what is called the Green Beret, and as President Kennedy said once, it is a symbol of excellence, a badge of courage, a mark of distinction in the fight for freedom. So, his service has taken him a lot of places: Bosnia, Liberia, Kosovo, the war in Iraq. He's been all over the world in the service and other reasons. Ricky Mills retired as a major from the U.S. Army, and it is my privilege to welcome him today as our speaker.
Good morning. There are 6 services that defend this country and your freedoms: the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines, the Coast Guard, which a lot of people don't know, and then now Space Force. Yes, the Space Force is real. The men and women serving are known as service members or veterans. I love all veterans because they are the 1% of America that did 2 things for you and me, for all of us. They gave their life away. They signed their name on the dotted line to die for this country. Whether it happened or not is not up to them. They did it. The ultimate sacrifice. And they volunteered to harm another person, to kill another person if they had to. The ultimate sin. Both of which are permanent. You cannot take either one of those back when it happens. The Bible states, "Greater love hath no man than this, that a man laid down his life for his friends." John 15:13. My name is Ricky Mills, and I'm here to talk to you today about Veterans Day and why it should be important to you. I'm going to talk a little bit about when I grew up in Jordan, Elbridge, what time in the Army over the last 20 years, and finally about what Veterans Day means to me and why you should thank veterans when you see them, especially during this time of year. By show of hands, does anybody know where Jordan, Elbridge is? Yeah, it's only about an hour from here. So we drove down here this morning. It's not much different than Marathon. It's a little bigger, but our auditoriums are comparable. I went to Jordan Elbridge Elementary. The bus that took my nieces Brittany and Erica to school, this is exactly the same bus that drives kids to school 30 years ago. Both the towns of Elbridge and Jordan look exactly as they did 30 years ago. When I was a little boy running around, playing with my friends, riding my bike through town. I remember going to Jordan Pool during the summer and going swimming, and going to Science Hill and sledding down Science Hill in the winter. I graduated from Jordan Elbridge High School in 1989. I was an average student. I got B's and C's on my report cards. Once in a while, though, I could scratch out an A when I studied really hard. But what I learned from getting those A's was, after putting forth just a little bit more effort and hard work, was that if I put enough effort into something, I could do anything. Like many of you, physical fitness has always been important to me. I wrestled in high school. I wasn't that good, but I wrestled in high school. And I participated in ski club one year. Both of those sports helped me later in my military career. And the values that Coach Fruit instilled in us back then still stand strong today. Hard work, discipline, motivation, and integrity. For as long as I can remember, though, all I've ever wanted to do since I was born was be a soldier. My father served, my uncle served, my grandfather served. Some of my fondest memories were looking at my father's 8mm slides. If you don't know what that is, that's one of those round reels with these little square things. You could press the button, it would make that wild noise like, and it would like slide the thing up. My father used to pull that out every once in a while and roll through them. From his time in the Army and going to the VFW or American Legion with my grandfather, Robert O'Connor. Or play pool while he sat and talked with the other veterans. My best memories, though, are of sitting around and listening to the men tell stories about what they did in the far-off places they went to. It's still one of my favorite things to do, even after doing 20 years in the military. That was when I learned there were other places in the world than Jordan Overage, New York State, or even the United States of America. Places called Germany, Japan, Korea, and Vietnam. Some of you may have heard of these places in the stories of your grandfathers, and some of you may have heard of those other places like Afghanistan or Iraq from your fathers, or relatives, or family friends who were veterans themselves. I joined the Army on July 26, 1989, right after I left high school. I told the recruiter that I wanted to be in the woods a lot, and I wanted to jump out of planes. He was a very happy recruiter. He said, I got a job for you. What I remember the most about joining the Army was feeling that I was doing something bigger than myself. I was volunteering to serve my country and do whatever I was asked to do, no matter what. I wanted to defend America, my religion, my family, my country, and my way of life, our way of life, from the people that I had heard about in the stories of my grandfather and father. I spent 20 years in the Army serving with some of the best men and women America has. They came from every state in the United States, and they all looked and talked differently when we first started. Black, white, brown, yellow, red, any color of your skin or gender did not matter. We were all green, Army green. And we were all proud of what we were doing. Your value was measured in your hard work, discipline, motivation, and integrity. Remember where I got those words? We did not necessarily like everything we did, but we did it for the betterment of the men and women to our left and right. Some of the people that I served with became the best of friends and will remain so for the rest of my life. We understand each other. Veterans Day to me is a day to remember the sacrifices that men and women that already have served, are serving right now, and will serve our country in the future make during every day that they are in uniform. I think that it's important to start by defining the word sacrifice, as it means to me. A lot of people associate the word sacrifice with joining and serving in the military without really thinking about what that service costs men and women who serve. Sacrifice is not always about being in the service and being in uniform. Sacrifice is not always about being away from home, traveling to different countries and defending freedom and liberty in foreign countries. In most cases, the men and women who served are proud of where they have been and what they have done. They may not talk about that in the presence of other people. In most cases, veterans are quiet people, sticking to themselves and preferring not to talk about what they have done to defend this great nation, unless they are with other veterans, who they know really understand and will not judge them. Sacrifice is more importantly defined as the number of days a soldier, sailor, airman, marine misses out on the special things that his family does while they are gone serving you. Here are a few examples of the things that we miss when we are gone. Days, weeks, maybe months away from wives and children. Missed birthdays, holidays, anniversaries, graduations. Missed lacrosse games, baseball games, wrestling matches, and football games. Missing your kids grow 1 to 2 inches and mature during an entire summer or winter, or both. Missing dance recitals, weddings, and family or friends' births, deaths, and burials. As an example, when I was in Bosnia, at old dark 30, I got a phone call that my grandfather had passed away. I had 3 Special Forces ODAs under my command at that time, broken down, and we were chasing terrorists. European terrorists. The same terrorists that bombed and blew up the buses and the train stations in Spain and Britain. I was not leaving my men. I called my father, and I told my father, my grandfather knows that I love him, and I'll see my grandfather when I get home. Every service member gives away their freedoms in order to preserve yours. They get up early every day, before you wake up most of the time, and if they get to sleep, it is often some uncomfortable, wet, and dark place. When I was in the Rangers, our motto was, we do more before 9 o'clock than most people do in the world on a daily basis. I loved every single day I was in the Army, and I would go back in defense of this country again tomorrow if I had to. What we did not understand back then was that we were losing or giving away pieces of ourselves. Another example, when I returned from Iraq and actually finally linked up with my family, I had 4 children. At that time, my twins were very young, maybe 2 or 3. My twins did not recognize me. I actually hugged my my daughter, who remembered who I was, and my twins were afraid of me. They actually cried, and they didn't want me to hold them. It took time for them to actually realize that I was their father. A few days. That's a piece of me that I'll never get back. I retired from the Army 13 years ago on 31 October 2009. I spent 30 years away from my home, my friends, and my family. The kids are older now, but I am looking forward to never having to say goodbye to my wife, except to go hunting. So the next time you see a veteran, say thank you. Don't look at him from a distance and want to say thank you, or maybe wish you had later. Don't be ashamed or bashful. Get up and walk over and shake his or her hand and just say it. Say thank you for your service to the veteran and let them know you understand their sacrifice. Thank you.
Let's give Mr. Mills another round of applause, please. So George Washington, and I've quoted this quote before, said once that the willingness with which our young people are likely to serve in any war, no matter how justified, shall be directly proportional to how they perceive the veterans of earlier years were treated and appreciated by their nation. You can see signs of it in Marathon, the Civil War statue right in front of the school that was dedicated by veterans in 1893. The flagpole, the second flagpole, was put up in 1914 to dedicate and remember people who had fought in the Civil War. There is a large stone on the far end of the green that most of you have never looked at. It has names on it from World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam. Marathon has always tried to remember. We talked about last year how Oscar Robinson, the VFW named after him, was held. His body came back in World War I and sat in vigil across the street in the Methodist Church, 24-hour vigil for an entire weekend, and Marathon people flowed through and paid their respects. Marathon's always been good at remembering veterans and the fallen, but it's time for us to take the next chapter of that story. A committee is being formed here at the school, and we're looking for student engagement. We would like to add to that front green. How we're going to add, we're still working it out, but we think that it's time to honor those who have served in recent history. People like my former student, Dan Morehouse, one of my heroes. People who served in the war on drugs, the Persian Gulf, Panama, Desert Storm, the Persian Gulf War, Afghanistan, that's come to a close after 20 years, and the war in Iraq, other places that people won't even ever hear about. So if you're interested in that, you'll get an email. Please come to the committee meeting and see what we can do to make sure that the veterans from this generation are remembered as well, so that others will serve our country, like these who came today. Let's give them all, please, another round of applause. And Mrs. Marcolina has some closing remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Perks, and certainly it is time to honor our veterans of recent events. Thank you so much to our veterans who have taken time out of their schedules to spend time at our school and to share some of their inspiring stories. We appreciate you, and we here at Marathon are thankful for the sacrifices that you have made. I'd like to take a moment to also thank the Marathon Social Studies Department, especially Mrs. Brown and Mr. Perks, for their leadership of this event. At this time, I will now provide directions for the second portion of this event. Veterans, at this time, we will proceed outside to our flagpole. Students here in the auditorium, please honor our veterans by standing as they proceed out to the flagpole. Students viewing via live stream, please pause while we exit here for further directions.